Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma. Joining me here one morning after the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, my friend, how is it going? How you feeling?
Relieved. I feel like I was definitely doing one of the memes last night of phew. Oh, feel like a bullet was dodged, a disaster was averted, a hurricane went off in the other direction, an earthquake was stilled. I don't know. I feel much relieved.
Oh man, the tornado that would have been. I there was a lot of texts flying back and forth, even between me and you. I've got a group text with my two cousins. I talk about them a lot, especially Brad. He likes to complain and moan and this, that, and the other thing. And he's like, very pro Aaron Rodgers, as is Flash, who seemed to take the news very well this morning. He seems to have come to his senses a little bit. The Shador thing, it was like, I was laughing. There were people that were in the comment sections all over the place, whether you're like on X, whether you're on Facebook, and the folks were, somebody said, of course I should have picked the guy with the big, diamond filled chain around his neck. And I was just laughing. One of the things I texted out to people was, could you imagine if this team drafts Shador Sanders and still signs Aaron Rodgers? The circus, if you thought Mike Tomlin was dealing with stuff, and there's still a chance that Sanders is there. We may have said this on this show. I'm not sure if I did. I'm not sure if it was in a text or something like that. I'd love to take credit for thinking of this ahead of time. But what exactly happened last night, not that we knew exactly what was going to happen, but I said, what's the chances that Jackson Dart gets selected ahead of Shador Sanders? And lo and behold, the New York Giants, a little bit of peer pressure there on what happened at the very beginning of the draft, jumped back in the first round and grabbed Jackson Dart over Sanders, and everybody's sitting there with their shocked faces as though we haven't seen this story play out a few times.
And I thought the Giants trade back up was not a bad one at all. They didn't give up that much capital. It ain't like the Atlanta one, right? That was, to me, that was insanity. But
or Jacksonville with Cleveland. Whew.
Man, look, I'll be honest with you. The real reason I hate that pick is not because I think Jacksonville overpaid. It's because they overpaid to Cleveland.
Yes, sir. An additional second rounder in next year's first to move up 3 spots for a player they never even met with. They met with him at the Combine. They never had him in for a visit. They didn't do he didn't say pro days or anything. I don't know. I don't follow Jacksonville's visits enough to them just going by Travis Hunter saying, I don't know what they want me to do. I've never talked to anybody since the Combine. And I'm like, and they gave up all of this for you. But it is, in one way, it's kind of like, well, did Cleveland fumble this? Because now they don't have Travis Hunter. And that could be a good thing, to be completely honest. Whether or not he played on both sides of the field for them, a whole other story. But that's that first rounder that Jacksonville just gave away. I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, it's going to be another top 10 pick next year.
Very possibly.
Quit bailing the Cleveland Browns out from their terrible Deshaun Watson trade by allowing them to get top, cheaper talent in the draft. Stop doing this, folks. They weren't able to pick forever. They had like the last 3 years or so that was all given to the Houston Texans. And then they had a really crap year, so they end up with the second overall pick. I was hoping they took Shador. I'm not going to lie. And I'll look like a fool if Shador has a good pro career, obviously, but I just think that there is an immense gamble, especially at the top of the first round, but anywhere in the first round. I don't know that his body of work, and we're talking about the quarterback position, and we're talking about a big swing and a miss when you're trying to swing for the fences. I was okay. I mean, I was sweating like you were. I was like, oh. And I'm like, would they take Dart over Sanders is what I was thinking. But I'm like, Derrick Harmon's here. I think I was watching primarily NFL Network. Daniel Jeremiah he says, well, Derrick Harmon's here. And after Kenneth Grant had already gone, and Kenneth Grant went pretty, like, what, 18th or something, pretty close to the Steelers pick. But I was like, okay, there's some breathing room here. And the Bengals went with Stewart, right? I think they went with Shamar Stewart. So I was feeling pretty good about the Harmon pick. You were banging your fist for it. The professor, Zach Meckler, behind the scenes, that was his guy a month ago. As soon as they said he was meeting with the Steelers, he said, that's the pick. Give him his flowers for that. He had convinced me in one of my 2 mock drafts, because my other one that I published ahead of time over on the website was Amarian Hampton, who goes 1 pick later to the LA Chargers. So feel like kind of smartest guy in the room. But if you didn't see this going, or see this happening, at least like our watchers and viewers had to have known that this was a very strong possibility that Harmon was the pick, but we still didn't know exactly where they were going to go.
Right. I got asked to guest on another show, which I told you about yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. This was a draft where I just didn't know what the heck they were going to do. There were too many options, and to be honest, this draft class is just not chock full of guaranteed studs, right? It has a halfway decent D-line depth and pretty good running back depth. Outside of that, man, there's just not that much standout stuff, so it's really hard. Look, they pulled in every running back in pre-draft visits. They pulled in a lot of D-lines in pre-draft visits. We knew D-line was going to be a priority, and it had to be. They signaled that when they let Larry Ogunjobi go, right? And I know Keanu Benton is there, but Cam's 36 or 35 going to be 36.
Yeah, next month.
There is a need for depth along the defensive line, and they have to get better at stopping the run. So it's not really a surprise. We've been saying this all along. D-line. I bet that's what I wanted them to do. So I'm quite content with the pick. Outside of that, it'll be interesting to see. I stayed up last night simply to find out, did they do something crazy and try and come back?
I know that,
and I didn't expect them to, but I expect. I have no knowledge of this. I expect them to somehow end up with a second round draft pick tonight.
I know.
That's what I expect to have happen. Doesn't mean it will, but that's what I expect.
Well, we'll jump there real quick before I get to Harmon, before we talk about some of these other picks. We were trouncing on Cleveland a little bit. That's the one that really just grinded my gears. And just talking about the Giants, they didn't give up a whole lot to get back into the first round. I think it was the following year. It was the 2 this year, and then something else. I got to go back and look, but it wasn't super expensive to get back to where they got a quarterback that's going to be under a 5th-year option. I didn't hate that move at all. They had to get in front of Cleveland because Cleveland literally has 2 of the first 5 picks tonight, right? So they had to get in front of Cleveland, assuming that Cleveland might look at quarterback. I mean, it's obviously a big hole when you look at that roster. The teams that are left right now is the Steelers, the Browns, and probably the Saints, because they don't know what's going on with Derek Carr. And then you've got some outliers that may kick the tires on the quarterback position. It's there's talk of whether the Raiders, even though they gave the deal to Geno Smith, they say, look what the Falcons did last year. They're not 100% settled on Geno Smith for the future. And if Sanders is there, maybe they take Sanders. And that's got to be in the back of the mind. Cleveland can't miss on this. You know what I mean? The Giants had to think about that too. What if the Raiders go to the jump over, or the Saints are still in that top 10 area of the draft in each round? So for the ones that, I'm just kind of generically speaking here. I know there's been trades and some of these picks have moved around, but for the Giants, I thought that was a good move. The Falcons, it's just ooh, and they're going after, pass rushers galore. So they need some help on that front. But wow, I'm they did all of that for Pierce. I mean, that was,
and gave up another first round pick. I don't remember where they did they give up their second too? Is that what they did? Gave up a second.
I will get it for you here in a second. So I have all of it. There was so much.
They had to move way up. To get.
Well, and Cleveland made a trade with the Texans an hour before the draft even kicked off. So there was some other stuff going on.
Fifth and sixth or something. Yeah.
So Cleveland, there was They had their first round pick. There was a fourth and sixth round selections to Jacksonville that then swapped around for a first, second, and fourth, and then next year's first rounder. It was just that one was just a complete gigantic mess. So you got Cleveland at 33 and 36 this evening as we head into Friday's portion of the draft in the second round. Let's see here. Just at the top, then it's the Houston Texans. They have a pick from the Giants, but the Giants, they moved around and they gave up, let me see, first round selection in exchange for second and third rounders, and then third the following year. So it kind of goes with the math. You know what I mean? If you're giving up a 2, you're giving up and then 2 3s, and the 3s might be in the comp category like the Steelers and stuff too. I'm not 100% sure. So it's kind of wise, but man, Atlanta, let's see. The Rams gave up their first and a third, and Atlanta got second and seventh, and then a first round next year. So yikes.
That one feels like an overpay to me.
It was pick 46.
Next year is what kills it, right? To me, having to give up another first rounder to come back up, that's tough.
And we talked about this. Like, do you want to give up this much collateral, such as what Jacksonville did? I mean, if they view Hunter as this generational player, but we're going to do that for Jackson Dart? Jackson Dart, to me, as I've been saying, pretty much you're just getting another Justin Fields, maybe another Kenny Pickett. And that was said in the broadcast too. The analysis, the people that were talking throughout the evening said the same thing that we've been saying. The Steelers had already taken this swing and a miss with Pickett, and that was still Kevin Colbert. That wasn't Omar Khan, but Omar Khan's in the room, and I think that they may have learned their lesson that if you put him in there and then we're hurting somewhere else, and you can't stop Derrick Henry from running for almost 300 yards on your defense, that's where the Harmon pick makes the most sense. So I'm going to jump into Harmon here because, I mean, Sanders is still on the board. We'll talk about that in a moment. If they're truly interested or whether they would get try and get another second round pick. But a lot of people, they're like, oh, this is a wasted pick. Oh, this and that. Like, you know, he played in the Big Ten. He had his biggest year, obviously, after moving out of the Big Ten and going to Michigan State. People are looking at sacks, and you're looking at it the wrong way when you're looking at a 3-4 defensive tackle. Basically, a guy that's going to shift along the line and be playing the same kind of role as Cam Hayward does. Cam gets some sacks, don't get me wrong, but the entire thought process here is that Harmon kind of jumps in. He's going to get his feet wet. He's going to learn from an elite player that we feel should probably be a future Hall of Famer. And he's got to eat up. He's got to clog gaps. He's got to eat up blockers. And that is what he's poised to do. He had 11 tackles for loss last season at Oregon. Oregon was definitely one of the best teams in all of college football. And, you know, he was a tackling machine. He still got to the quarterback 5 times. We're not looking for that kind of motor, though, in a 3-4 defensive tackle. We might get Benton to play a little nose. I know that was something we were talking about when Benton came out of college. Maybe he's the guy on the nose. Maybe they just find somebody. Everybody's talking about, like, Casey Hampton, right? The next Casey Hampton. We haven't been good since Casey Hampton. And Mike Tomlin comes straight out in his pregame or pre-draft presser with Omar Khan and says that position is a dying breed. And I'm thinking to myself, dying breed? It was dead back when Casey was, you know, in his final seasons. Look at what happens when you've got to cover a third wide receiver on the field or a mobile quarterback. Tim Tebow, it was like the only thing Tim Tebow had to his resume is that he was, you know, he was a shifty guy. I mean, he wasn't the best passer, but let's not kid ourselves. You had to take Casey off the field more often than not. And then who'd they replace him with after that? Guys like Steve McClendon. You may have had Javon Hargrave, the gravedigger, but that wasn't necessarily his intended role. It's where he started as a rookie, and he was meant to kind of bounce around the same way that we're talking about. So when you're talking about a traditional nose tackle, with the Steelers defense with the 3-4, we're not. It's a guy that's playing maybe 20 to 30% of the game tops. They can get like an Armon Watts like they had before and just have somebody there. Ideally, though, it'd be nice if they found like another Tyson Alualu, a veteran player. He did more than serviceable when they had to use the 3-4. They'll have to use it against teams that like to run the ball, like the Ravens, like the Browns. But ultimately, you want the guy that's probably going to be out there more frequently and is, that's versatile. You need the versatility of a Derrick Harmon on this defense. So you get some youth. You got Cam turning 36. You didn't have Larry Ogunjobi. I think they got a win that he might get suspended. That's another reason he was let go. It was salary cap. Was he the most effective? Was he always healthy? None of those things seem to check certain boxes. So I like the Benton pick. And, 4-year college player. What else I got to say about him? I mean, it's a guy that can play all over the defensive front. And I think it's a player that helps the Steelers now versus if you took a Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, you're probably not starting the season with those guys. And long-term, you still don't know if they're the answer. Hopefully, in this case, you got Harmon as a long-term answer for the days beyond Hayward's retirement.
Yeah, I mean, Harmon is a player that can contribute immediately and for the future. At least that's the projection. I'll go back and say it over and over again. Any one of these guys is a crapshoot. You don't know. But look at, let's go back to what we talked about several shows ago. The second worst success rate for any position is quarterback when drafted in the top 10. Second worst. Wide receiver is the worst. The top success rates are offensive and defensive line. So, you've got a better shot at this guy being a successful, productive pick overall. And I'm just being honest, this is not the year to take the big swing at some potential quarterback, especially when it feels so familiar to the year they took Kenny Pickett. It's better to solidify the ranks and then take that swing later when you have the capital to maybe move around and do some other things.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I got some Pro Football Focus stuff. The 2022 grade, first-year starter let me make sure I got this right, as a sophomore. They haven't marked as sophomore twice and then senior. I hate the way sometimes the eligibility things go when I'm trying to look up stats. So he's a 4-year player. He played in 4 games as a freshman. Pro Football Focus, and who knows what they're looking at here, but they did not like Harmon in 2022, 59.8 grade. Then he jumped to 78.4 while he was still at Michigan State. That season he had 18 quarterback hurries, and he had just the one hit on the quarterback. That jumps to 7 when he goes to Oregon last year with 43 hurries. He had the most pressures in college football of any defensive lineman. So in 2024, he had an 83.9 grade by Pro Football Focus. And where he lined up primarily last season, A gap 28, not playing nose tackle. He can get an over B gap 353 and then over tackle 188. He only lined up outside the tackle 21 times once off the ball. Those are kind of maybe some anomalies, maybe some special packages. Maybe there's extra defensive linemen in if they're in a goal line stance. So I kind of take those with a grain of salt. I'm liking the pick. I don't have to convince myself. It may sound like I'm trying to convince myself. I don't really want to convince anybody else either. We've been sitting here. You've been talking about defensive linemen forever. And I said if they passed on Harmon, God forbid he lands with the Philadelphia Eagles or something, because it would be such a pick that the Eagles would make. And they moved up too. They moved up like one spot, probably so the Chiefs wouldn't trade out of that spot to take, I forgot who they grabbed. They grabbed Mad Max, didn't they? Or no, that was Buffalo. Never mind. Max Hairston.
No, the Eagles grabbed Jihad.
Campbell, the linebacker.
Linebacker.
Yes,
yeah,
linebacker.
Campbell.
So that's an interesting pick too. And I said, wow, I'm like, for Buffalo to get like Maxwell Hairston at the bottom of the draft, that was pretty good. Chiefs get their tackle. They get Josh Simmons from Ohio State. So let's go from the top here, and then we'll talk about some of the players that are still available. Unless you got anything else to say about Harmon. And I know it's not that when you take the Steelers draft picks over the last couple of seasons have not been the most sexiest picks. Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Derrick Harmon. You don't get, the same kind of highlight reels, the same kind of, You're not excited to maybe purchase the jersey, whatever number Harmon's going to wear. I don't know. I think all of 90s are like taken. So I think 99 is what Ogunjobi had, right? That one's probably still available, but people don't maybe get as excited about this as, you try and get excited to talk about Sanders, and I don't think I would be excited to talk about Sanders. If they make some kind of move and end up back in the second round and take Sanders, that's a whole different story. But let's see who's available and see who's taken. I think there was no surprise with Cam Ward, number 1 overall to the Titans, Travis Hunter to the Jaguars, the Giants stand pat, Abdul Carter. We kind of knew that was coming. Will Campbell. A lot of these were like the usual suspects before it started to get a little crazy. You're like, okay, who did the Cleveland Browns get? And I'm glad they didn't get Will Campbell. I'll be honest. Yep. They go with Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan. That's a very good pick for them. They could use that. So, as much as I poo-poo on the Browns, and they should be, this was good. This was okay. I'm fine with that as a safe pick. They didn't go swing for Ashton Genty. I have no idea what he's going to be like as a pro. He looks great. Like say a good fit for the Raiders, maybe. Armand Membo, another tackle, goes to the Jets. McMillan. Tetaroa McMillan. I think I finally said that right. To the Panthers. That's the one that got me, because when you look at the mock drafts, almost everybody's wrong, right? And I know we're over here like, patting our backs and saying, yeah, Harmon. And it's easy when you have the draft visits and everything like that. But they looked at a whole bunch of other people in the draft, a lot of other positions. They definitely looked at Dart. They had Shador Sanders in. So you didn't know this necessarily for certain that he was going to be the pick. Right. Let's see who else we've got here. Okay, so Kelvin Banks to the Saints, the tackle from Texas. So 3 tackles in the first, or 3 tackles in the top 10. You've got Michael Williams, edge rusher, San Francisco 49ers. Tyler Booker, guard, to the Dallas Cowboys. Kenneth Grant then goes, the other Michigan defensive lineman. He heads on over to the Miami Dolphins. And that one I didn't have a pulse on. Tyler Warren, kind of surprisingly, over to the Indianapolis Colts. And let's see. Atlanta Falcons went for Jalen Walker. Oh, I skipped over the Bears with Colston Loveland. Tight end pick there, too. Sorry, I skipped one. That was at 10. So you had two of the tight ends go. I was like, wow, okay. I mean, I guess it's pick your poison. 2
tight ends and 2 running backs go in the first round. That's quite a bit.
That is. It's a very strange draft, because you're looking around this draft and you're like, okay, where's the Derek Stingley, right? Where's these top corners at that you've always got? Why does his name escape me right now? The guy that went to the Jets a year or 2 ago. I can't think of his name right now, but he was drafted very highly too. You didn't have anybody like that with this one. Even like the talk in Joey Porter's class, there was a couple of corners that went ahead, and Joey was still there at like 32, and there's a lot of buzz. And it was like, you've got Travis Hunter, and that's about it. You know what I mean? I know Barron goes here shortly, but they had him listed as a DB, as a safety, maybe a little bit more of Swiss knife. So, okay, Tyler Warren at 14 to the Colts. Jalen Walker, the first edge that goes to the Falcons. Another Georgia guy. Lots of Georgia players, lots of Ohio State players, some Bama guys mixed in. Walter Nolan goes to the Cardinals. I said, here we go. Run. Shamar Stewart then goes to the Bengals. Sigh of relief, because now I'm like, okay. We have Grant off the board. We have Nolan off the board, but Shamar Stewart going to the Bengals means that Harmon doesn't line up against Steelers. He's still going to be there. The Seahawks went with offensive lineman, the North Dakota State kid, Gray Zabel. Emeka Ibuka to the Buccaneers. So a lot of people had McMillan penciled in there. That's a fine pick. That's a real fine pick, and he could learn. And they've got like a stable of receivers too. So the one that surprised me was the Broncos, because a lot of people thought that the Broncos were going to go running back. Thought Omarion Hampton was going to be gone. So Brian, once Jahdae Barron goes to the Broncos, they have him listed as a corner. I'm sitting there. It's Harmon. Omarion Hampton's there. And then you've got Sanders and you've got Dart. And it's like, where are they going to go? Because it's got to be one of these 4, I think. And I'm good with it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Is that the same way you were kind of feeling while you were sitting there?
I had this moment of dread, thinking, they're going to draft Sanders. Oh, my God, it's going to be a nightmare. And then I stopped myself, and we were texting back and forth, and I said, it's going to be Harmon. It's going to be Harmon. I'm calling it. And then I sent you the fingers crossed emoji because I'm like, please let it be Harmon. I would have been fine if they got Omarion Hampton. I would have been fine if they traded back. I'm fine with drafting Derrick Harmon. That is where I've been saying I wanted him to go since the beginning of the process. So how can I complain?
Yeah, well, you can complain because it's not a quarterback. A lot of people still feel it could be Aaron Rodgers. A lot of people think it's because Aaron Rodgers is just sitting there. Again, I have to keep remembering Aaron Rodgers was released. He doesn't impact the comp pick stuff. He's just playing his own games, whether he has real personal stuff going on, whether he's contemplating retirement or trying to go somewhere other than Pittsburgh.
I said this yesterday as I was talking, and I think this is true. What Davante Adams said, I think is probably very likely. Aaron Rodgers wants somebody. He's got a hero complex. Aaron Rodgers wants somebody to roll the red carpet out for him and proclaim him the savior of your team. The Steelers met with him, but they're not going to do that. They're not going to be like, oh, please, oh, the joys of Aaron Rodgers have come to us. Oh, all bow down and worship the mighty Aaron Rodgers. He wants to go in like a knight on a white horse to save everyone. And I'm sorry, first of all, I don't know that you were ever that guy, but you're not that guy now, for sure. And you're not going to be that guy here. And yeah, maybe somebody goes down, somebody goes down later in the season as an injury, and you come in to give them some hope. But I know they've made that. This is what I said a long time ago. They made their offer to Aaron Rodgers. That's it. I don't think they'll pull it. I think they understand they still need to fill out that room. But they're basically, here's what we're willing to do. Thank you very much. Please let us know if you're interested. And then they went about their business.
Yeah, and I still think part of their plan was they were going to they really looked at this quarterback class. We'll talk about who else is available from there. But yeah, the Rodgers thing, again, I'm still shooting my shot on this. You're right, being a hero, it's going to be very difficult if someone gets hurt and he jumps in at like week 3, having no offseason with whatever team, unless it's somebody's system he was already in or somebody that branches from said system. So, yeah. And for the last few years, I wouldn't think a Nathaniel Hackett system is something that's really worked out well for Mr. Rodgers. And then he's older and has to jump in right away and, get the calluses and the football shape and everything else. And then I think that's going to be a whole circus itself. I still keep saying that guy wants to play for the Vikings. He doesn't have to play in inclement weather. He gets to play his old team twice a year. He gets to throw the Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. They got a good line. They got a good defense. They got an offensive-minded coach. But that team is not looking to do that just yet. But they have Brett Rypien as their backup quarterback there. And J.J. McCarthy that's coming off of a major injury that they don't know if he's any good or not or if he's the guy. And this is a team that just won 14 games. They may get desperate enough to throw a little extra money in a starting role to Aaron Rodgers, and that's say Levy. And everybody's going to say Omar Khan screwed this up. Omar Khan did not screw this up. Screwing this up, Brian, is all of the picks you give up to swap with the Chicago Bears to take Bryce Young. Screwing this up is all of the picks and guaranteed money that you give away to the Houston Texans to acquire Deshaun Watson. That's screwing up your draft. If you take a swing, and I mean, it didn't screw up the 49ers too bad, but it might have, because now they got a lot of players that they're struggling to re-sign. There's some holes that they're filling, but they took that swing for Trey Lance, and he never ended up playing. The only reason you didn't notice it is because Brock Purdy was more than serviceable, and he's about to be a $50 million a year quarterback. You got to look at that too. There's a lot of teams that are copycatting. They're like, wow, if we find our Brock Purdy, the Steelers got to be thinking about that too. If they're not in love with some of these other players and Derrick Harmon can help you better and make the defense better, and then he's your missing piece, you could probably win with anybody back there. Don't forget the Ravens were winning with what? Trent Dilfer, Elvis Gerback, Joe Flacco. I know I'd be smirching the good name of Joe Flacco. But the Steelers were kicking the tires on him as far as being a guy that could be back there. I think they feel they could win with Mason Rudolph or just some other younger guy that they develop. And there's guys still out there. Now, they don't have a second-round pick, but that second-round pick was also used to help whoever that player ends up being, which is DK Metcalf. Omar Khan said it. I totally love trading that second-round pick and getting DK Metcalf. I do too. Let me continue real quick. Wide receiver off the board to the Packers to a great hometown ovation there. Matthew Golden out of Texas. Vikings take Donovan Jackson, the guard out of Ohio State. Jackson Dart, as we mentioned earlier, 25th overall to the New York Giants, who traded back in to the first round. James Pierce, also from the Falcons, trading back into the first round. Malachi Starks, like a defensive back, corner, safety. That tracks for them. Rich Eisen was saying it tracks a lot yesterday. That tracks.
Me.
Yeah, but this year I'm not as upset about the Ravens pick as I would have been in previous years. I'm not like, oh, that's the guy that the Steelers absolutely. I would have loved to have that pick.
Oh yeah, because we weren't going to get him, and obviously that's not where we had our need.
No,
but it annoys me that they got it.
So. And it annoys me they drafted all.
Yes, exactly. I think they should just be forced to play with scraps from the people's practice squads.
The UFL.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Ravens. You can only use people who are unrestricted free agents from you've lost all your draft picks.
You could only take players from like the Arlington Renegades.
Yes, there you go. Perfect.
Closing this out, Josh Tyleek Williams to the Lions, Josh Connerly to the Commanders, Mad Max Hairston to the Buffalo Bills, Jihad Campbell to the Eagles, Josh Simmons to the Kansas City Chiefs. We know who's all sitting out there. Steelers don't pick again until 83.
83.
Ooh, that's a long time. It starts with 33 tonight. And I'll tell you the player I would love to have fall in their lap at 83. It's not Jalen Milroe. Although I wouldn't be as upset with that if that happened at 83 as I would if it happened at 48, 51, second round, or 21. So I don't know if he's going to last. Got to make it through a whole second round. Got to make it through 50 picks, but Travion Henderson is the guy I want.
Running back is what I want at 83. That is 100% right. And if they feel like there's a run going on, like I think there's a good chance that with one of those second round picks, the Browns take Shadar Sanders. I think that there's a reasonable likelihood of that, right? And take the risk. It's a much more reasonable risk in the second round than it would have been with the second pick. So I actually, I know we hate to say good things about the Browns, but I'm less inclined to be annoyed by doing that than you are. I like what they did. It annoys me that I like what they did, but I think they put themselves in a good position to have a successful draft because of it and make up for the mistakes of the past to a certain extent. All right. That being said, I do think the Steelers are going to pick before 83. I think they're going to get a pick. I think that pick could very well be a running back. And then in either the third or the fourth rounds, I expect them to take a quarterback. Somebody that is a developmental potential backup, maybe with starter potential kind of guy. I'd love to see them double dip at D-line, to be honest with you. But I think that is probably going to be unlikely. At this point, unless they pull something to trade George Pickens, I don't see them taking a wide receiver until late.
Or at all, even though you got two guys on rookie deals. I mean, you still, like on the last year of the rookie deals, you still got Roman Wilson from last year, and you brought back like Ben Skoranek and Scotty Miller. And you've got six guys in the room when you count Metcalf, Pickens, Austin, Wilson, and then Skoranek and Miller. I don't see that I don't see them reaching, especially when they don't have that many picks. But Omar also said that, they weren't necessarily they didn't have the picks or the ammunition to move around. So kind of, I was looking at the charts here, and I mean, let's just say it was the Browns value. Their pick at 33 is valued at 580. It drops out of 500 after the Saints at pick 40. So when the Steelers are back on the clock again with 83, their pick's only worth 175. And if it's worth the same kind of value next year to give up another 3 to get back into the second round, they're probably not going to jump in until around 50-ish. And then that means they have to give up 83 this year and another 3 next year. And then they won't have another pick until the fourth round, which could very well be Tyler Shugg, Will Howard, Kyle McCord. I think those guys last that far. Milroe probably will not. Milroe, I expect him just based on his, I've said I didn't necessarily care for Milroe and watching him play, the accuracy and some of that, but there's no denying the physical talents that he has. He is an athlete. and somebody might be able to take and do what they did with Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson or somebody like that and tailor make your offense to work around that. And if he doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot, I could see him do it. But there's still the struggle bus that was Justin Fields and not being able to get 1 yard, even with a mobile quarterback. That still scares me with taking Milroe, moving up, giving up a pick and taking him in the second round. Give me Travion Anderson. That's the beast that I want. I didn't look at necessarily needs for a lot of the teams picking right now. The Browns might be in the market for a running back too, since they've got multiple picks. The Giants and Titans, teams like that, just they need a whole team. So like they need like lots of good players. Patriots, Bears, Saints, maybe not so much the Jets, 49ers, then we start to dwindle off. Cowboys sitting there. That would be a Jerry move. But you got Luther Burden there too, so you never know when one of these teams had an extra wide receiver, but they all need players, right? You start to get into some teams like the Falcons. I don't know about the Broncos too, but running back's so weird anymore because you had this kind of like renaissance for it with the free agent class last year and a few bell cows, but I still don't think we're fully all the way there. But the Steelers definitely need somebody because Jaylen Warren, I don't think, is able to carry the torch the full way. I still have ball security questions about Warren, more so for Kenneth Gainwell. At least you have a veteran player that you could plug in. But if Warren gets banged up, I don't want Gainwell to be the primary option. He might not be the primary option at all. So, and I think Henderson would be an upgrade over Najee Harris, who now has to contend with Omari and Hampton in a shared backfield.
So annoyed by that pick, I'm telling you. He's like, what? You just signed me. I have incentives in my contract. What the hell?
Yeah, them incentives aren't going to get met if but you never know. Harbaugh, they might just run the ball, even with Herbert, run the ball a bazillion times. You never know. But
they very well might.
But more or less, I'm looking at trade partners, teams that might be more inclined to swap out of that pick, maybe like a Tampa Bay, Green Bay, Chargers, Bills, Panthers. I don't know. I got to remember where the Panthers are because they just gave up some of this stuff, so this list might be a little old. But that's going to be about it. I don't know. And then you're at the very bottom of round 2 with the Lions, Commanders, Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles. And they could all be trade partners, perhaps, if they try and like just jump up a few picks. So that's where I'm at.
This way.
Yep.
Is there a wide receiver left in this draft, right, that you think can be had in the second round that's better than George Pickens?
I like Iowa State's Jaden Higgins, but I don't know. Better than Pickens, and would you take him in? Is he a second rounder, perhaps? Jalen Noel, also from Iowa State, if I have them both in here. I get those guys conflated sometimes. And then who else? I'm looking at their draft visions. Savion Williams out of TCU. Like, it might be
this is not a great draft class for wide receiver.
No, it's not. Isn't. No.
And so I asked that question knowing that my answer is probably not. Maybe Luther Burden and maybe not even him, right? And so if you're a team that is in need of a study kind of wide receiver and you've got a pick and the Steelers come knocking, maybe you listen. I don't think the Steelers are shopping George Pickens, but I do think they're listening to offers. And so if I'm a team and I'm like, wide receiver is the need I want, I've got a second round pick, I know the Steelers want to get back into the second round because they want to do something, let me call them and see what I can do. This is where you might get better value than you would normally get for somebody like George Pickens. Honestly, don't think they would get a 2 if it wasn't a need at the time for some team, right? Some team is in desperation mode and is like, we got to get a wide receiver. Maybe you get a 2. But other than that, you're probably looking at a 3, which I don't think I make that deal.
No. My hope, honestly, is, we've got, with the wide receivers, that's basically the guys that they visited with. There's a few others that haven't been drafted yet, but they're kind of, depending on the big boards you look at, they're kind of like, you start to get into the hundreds of where they're ranked on a big board. They're just, most of your so-called draft experts, who aren't always experts, you know what I mean? But
oftentimes they're not.
But there's consensus, and what I like about the consensus of Henderson maybe falling, you got Cam Scatabo from Arizona State. I like him, but Steelers didn't. I don't believe the Steelers met with Scatabo. Dylan Sampson they did meet with out of Tennessee.
Yep.
He's just a little maybe smaller, lighter. Well, I don't know. Yeah, he's almost the same. Henderson, I don't know. Henderson to me feels like a guy who breaks tackles. You know what I mean? Like he feels like a guy that could go north-south, right? Caleb Johnson, maybe. He's a little bit heavier of a guy. That's another one that they met with. Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State was not a guy that they looked at. He's still available out there. I mean, we like him because we're Buckeyes fans, but I don't know what the Steelers' interest is.
They were at the pro day.
They
So
were.
that, there's some, they were at the pro day, so there you go.
They still were able to do their homework on him, right?
Yeah.
RJ Harvey, 5'9", out of UCF. So he's a little bit older of a player. He's about 24 years old. When you're looking at like Dylan Sampson, he's not 21 yet. Caleb Johnson's like 21 and a half. Henderson's 22 and a half. Judkins is 21 and a half. Harvey's 24 years old already as a running back, 5'9", 208. Did they? No, they didn't take a peek at Damian Martinez out of Miami either. Jaden Blue, Texas, guy that might be there a little bit later if they jump the gun and do the quarterback thing. Then Jaden Blue's probably there in the fourth round, and we'll be talking about that later. Some of the further stuff. So I don't want to get too much meat off this bone. Brian, thanks for joining me once again. I think we're happy with so far the picks, what it's got in the Steelers. Derrick Harmon, DK Metcalf. I think we're good with that.
Yeah, so far so good.
And Jalen Milroe watch, maybe not. We'll find out. But that's all it's going to be discussed. The talking heads are going to be talking about who are the Browns going to try and take, who are the Steelers going to try and take as a quarterback. And that might go past this show into our next show and into day 3 on Saturday. Until then, folks, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Till next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.